Hello and welcome to Spotlight by Amazing Workplaces. At Amazing Workplaces, we are on a mission to bring the best practices of organizations from all across the globe on a single platform. Our show Spotlight puts into focus established names in the corporate as well as the business world, both leaders as well as entrepreneurs, to engage with them in conversations about how they impact their organizations, their people, as well as the community through their endeavors. Today's Spotlight discussion focuses on Beate Schulte. Beate has more than 13 years of experience in the space of recruitment marketing. She is currently Senior Expert Employer Branding at All for One Group. Beate is a talent acquisition professional, a corporate culture enabler, and lean change management learner. She is particularly passionate about employer branding. Beate believes that a good employer brand is created through active appreciation, transparency, and comprehensible behavior, not just during recruitment and onboarding process, but also during transition. Beate joins us from Germany to speak to us about employer branding, employee value proposition, and how these two impact each other. Welcome, Beate, to Spotlight. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm quite delightful that I'm part of Spotlight here and being part of the amazing workplace community then.
Thank you so much. Thanks for accepting our invitation. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today about employee value proposition and employer branding because that's what you do best. And it would be lovely to, yeah, it would be lovely to understand, from you the various aspects of these two phrases basically.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also when you look today, I think the topic culture and employer branding is more valuable and more important than ever, especially here in Germany, but also in Europe. I also think in the whole world, since we are all in the war of talents. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Beate, when it comes to attracting and retaining talent, we often hear about two important aspects basically, employer branding and employee value proposition. So, how is an organization's employer brand different from its employee value proposition? And why should we not confuse between both of these?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And thank you for asking, because more or less the employer value proposition is the step before the employer branding, more or less, or the employer brand, because the EVP is more or less the identity, the DNA of an employer. It's more or less coming from the marketing and the sales. Yeah, thinking. When you look at the USP, it tells you more or less the facts in a short way why you should work with that employer, with that organization, and what makes the organization so unique in a really short version. That's the EVP. And looking at the employer brand, it's more or less the translation of the EVP into the different markets, yeah, in the different areas, in the whole candidate and employee life cycle and touch point management. That's the promise that you give when somebody, for example, is entering the company and stays within the company. That's more or less the brand.
Employee value proposition, like you're saying, is basically the main features or the key aspects of an organization that they want to offer to employees. Yeah. And the employer brand is how they offer it, right?
Yeah, exactly. How they offer it and how can they actually keep the promise that they have and the DNA they actually figured out during an identification process. Yeah, you do when you want to know your EVP, you also look on the culture. So you work together with employees, with different target groups within the organization, but also different companies as soon as you are global and countries, and work together. What is the current culture and what is the future aspects of behavior and patterns you need in the organization in order to be successful. And that's the EVP, and then you transmit it into the different areas. Exactly.
Okay, so Beate, if I may ask, how does one come to the conclusion of what an EVP should be? How do you decide the correct EVP for an organization?
I think there are different ways to do so. I think there's no one way in terms of this methodology is the right one to identify your EVP, of course. So my best way at the moment is to work with the current employees, really with the organization and the people there, and talking with them about what they feel, why are they here, what is their collaboration, the behavior, what they see, feel, and observe, for example, within the organization. And that is actually EVP, that's the culture, more or less. And the culture is something that you probably are not able to grab. It's something like, something which is between us. It's the thing how you communicate, how you give feedback, how actually people are behaving in a room. It's so many things and many things that you have. And probably you also know that every country has a different culture on a society base, but you also have individual traits, so, and those individual traits are coming together, of course, in an organization. And so it's something that you figure out.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Beate, tell me one thing. While employee value proposition and employer branding are different aspects serving the same goal, these two are surely correlated. So, how does the EVP of an organization impact its employer branding?
Mhm. Yeah, it's also a good question. I think it's a correlation because as soon as you have identified your EVP, you don't know the aspects, the cultural aspects, what differs you from the competitors or other organizations, you actually develop your strategy, and that's the employer branding then, in terms of how can we make this EVP touchable, tangible, so authentic that everybody actually feels, understand it, and knows exactly what is our employer value proposition. So you actually do an assessment or a workshop together with your employees. It's a co-creation workshop to see, okay, which aspects are we able, for example, to strengthen our EVP,
Right.
what harms our EVP, and what is missing in order to fulfill our EVP. And you look actually on 4 aspects. You look on the, the corporate, the processes that you have within the organization, even the corporate architecture. You look at all HR management systems, policy, practices, whatever you have with regard to HR, because those are the more touch points within the employees, of course. And you also look on the leadership, the leadership branding, and you also look on the internal communication part. And you actually do this in a workshop to really say, okay, what strengthens our EVP in this area? What do we have already? What is actually what harms it, and what is missing, more or less? And then you see exactly which instruments or which policies, which practices, which processes should be implemented, should be deleted, should be revised, and that's all the process, more or less.
Okay, pretty interesting. So, Pete, tell me one thing. You have had a vast experience on working with brands, and you have helped create great employer branding experiences for organizations. So, can you share a few real life examples from your own experience of how a good employer brand can create a positive influence on hiring and retention? And if you can just add a few aspects of what a good employer brand should be. Yeah.
So yes, of course, I would love to share my good practices with regard to employer branding. First of all, I would love to start with attracting the people and getting to know, of course, from the brand and the employer. So there you have different points or different possibilities with regard to advertisement to attract the people. But the most important way is to lead them to your career webpage. Yeah, and there in the career page, it's important, of course, to reflect your EVP or to reflect your employer brand, even with colors, with pictures, with words. Words are so powerful and everybody understands something different under the word team play, for example, or courage. So that's something where you are able to reflect your employer brand already. And when you go into the application process, of course, when you say, yes, I'm quite a dynamic, fast, a quick decision company, then of course the first wow moment is your application process is really fast and it reflects, of course, your EVP and the promise that you have within the company, the culture. So there's also something where you have the first wow moment with regard to application. And of course, when you're looking and getting in touch with the person in the organization, the recruiter, or even the hiring manager, there you start already focusing on cultural aspects, on your EVP. So when you have your EVP, you also identify the cultural fit, and this cultural fit you ask with different questions in order to see the right behavior and like the situation where he actually shows the behavior that you need for your organization. And after that, it's every touch point that you have with the candidate, from signing the contract until, for example, the onboarding process. We are able to reflect the values, the company values, and the EVP that you have with different ideas. So we also had like when you are more focusing on like respectful communication, or you say, okay, we are people who always want to have a wow, for us, we want to exceed and want to make the customer, but also the employees and everybody that they have a great effect experience, then you also do something that probably he didn't expect. So you also need the expectation in order to know exactly to exceed it. And that's are also things that you have to look for. But also when you come into an organization, there sometimes you have the gap, for example, to see, do I get the right information, the right feeling when I'm into the company? And then you also have to work really closely with the leadership and the leadership branding and tell them, okay, why they actually are role models for all the corporate values and your employer brand, and how they actually do steer the people, how do they communicate with them, which words do they use, and also giving the employee the possibility to understand the EVP, making lean coffee sessions that they know exactly, okay, how is the culture based here, and where are single point of truth for the culture. But going back also for the appraisal, appraisal formulas, then you sometimes have also reflected the EVP and the corporate values, and also how to carry out the feedback, depending, of course, your employer brand then. But that's also something quite important, giving feedback, communication, and so on, appreciation. And if, for example, your EVP tells you, okay, you need an organization that tries more, that is not that risk averse, then you also need like room to be more risky, for example, and to establish a culture where it's possible to make, for example, an 80% approach, the Pareto principles, for example, but that's also something that depends on the culture then, like or also people to enhance the mystery lunch, with the, okay, I don't know exactly what I'm getting for lunch, but let me surprise, so There are different examples to do so. And also we're looking back at the end of the cycle, of the employee cycle, I've always experienced when you look at charts on a system, but also when they look the HR business partners on their map, you also see touch point like exit interview, I think it's called, the last touch point where you put the exit interview into the system, yeah, with all the feedback that you have your checklist and so on, and you ask the questions. But you mean as soon as somebody's actually resigning or get dismissed due to different reasons, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations and people feel at this moment when you say you are leaving a company, you're leaving a job that you love or organization to any circumstances, there sometimes they feel not the EVP reflected. They don't feel the culture that they are used into. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of room for improvement for even the management, the leaders, but also for HR to look at this process, separation management, to look exactly how is the separation culture, is it still reflecting our corporate values, our employer brand, because you always see twice yourself, the people in your life, or even you also want to have a good reputation with regard to your employer brand. You know, you get evaluated at Glassdoor or in Germany at Kununu. So I think this also, the exit is something where you have to look into as an employer brand manager. And also see, okay, how is that process, because those are the last months more or less of the employee, and those also have to be quite like well experienced. And even when you look at alumni communities and so on, it's always good to leave or to separate in a good way. Yeah.
Do you feel that organizations can use separation management and exit interviews to improve their employer branding, because would actually help them understand where they are going wrong? Yeah. So, if a lot of people are voicing the same reason for leaving, it could actually become a guiding force for an organization to relook at their own policies and the way they're recruiting talent and what is it that they're offering to employees. So do you feel that that can be done, and that organizations should actually look at it seriously?
Yes, exactly. You're completely right. I completely agree. So out of the exit interviews, you get a lot of pain points, more or less, or even good points, also both sides. And both information, also the information is extremely valid and extremely worthy, more or less, valuable. So there should be, and I think that's missing sometimes because the process looks okay. Exit goes into HR business partner or you name it, it's not placed actually at the employer brand manager's side. So sometimes there's a link missing, more or less. I have qualitative feedback, but what do I doing? Yeah, also so the link to say, okay, who should I form? Is there going to be a task form? Is there going to be a pattern, for example, with regard to the people who are leaving? So the exit interviews analysis sometimes takes place, but sometimes it's, that's my experience so far, that they are not taking actions so far. Sometimes a little bit, okay, it's a leadership issue. Okay, then we have to work on the leadership. Yeah, so far. But sometimes if you look at systems and processes, then sometimes it's a little bit difficult. Yeah, when you're looking at depending on how big is the organization and how can I actually influence things. And I think there are also different theories in terms of should I look at the system and the processes with regard to demotion, also demotivation, more or less, so what actually demotivates the people with regard to processes and systems, in an organization. When you're looking again with regards to separation management and a good experience, whether a good employer brand is actually reflected, or even the corporate cultures, is one, when you do an exit interview, you ask really honestly and with interest with regard to the feedback. Yeah, to say, okay, why are you leaving us? For example, if somebody resigns by himself, a voluntary leave. So what ask really honestly for feedback, and to see, okay, is there anything with regard that we are able to do to keep you longer, in terms of, okay, what was missing, yeah, that you decided to leave. Also, when you decide to leave to any reason, then there's no we call it callback variant, that you are actually saying, how can I celebrate, or how can I do the last 3 months? In German, we have a notice period of 3 months. How can I create a good feeling there? How can I actually do the takeover of projects? Yeah, to say the employee is still willing, yeah, to give and to share information, to make a good handover, although he is leaving. So take that initiative and the motivation, and let him be responsible for the takeover, yeah, so that he's actually able to finalize his projects, yeah, because the projects are and the tasks are so important for him, and that he also is able to share his knowledge to other people. He's always able to, for example, still participate in meetings, yeah, in team meetings. I also had heard a lot, for example, that people are, as soon as they resign, they are dismissed at meetings, yeah, and although they're still working there, that's also something to say, okay, you're still part of an organization until actually you are going out and leaving, yeah, the leaving day. So still part with your ideas and with your effort and energy, but also giving them a party, to say goodbye to everybody, and the possibility, even virtually or live, so that they're able to say goodbye to everybody they want to, but also having the possibility to exchange personal contact details and so on. And I think it's also a celebration when they're coming, but it's also a celebration when they're leaving. And that's something I think I've experienced so far in companies, that it's a good way to say goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Beate. Thank you so much for sharing this valuable information with us, and sharing these little nuggets of information from your experience. It's been wonderful speaking to you on Spotlight. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to share my experience within the Spotlight format. And I hope I could help and give information out to the community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks, Beate. Thanks once again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.